Welcome, everybody. It's my name's Trevor Kennedy, Principal Solution Architect here at AWS. And today I'm joined by Harith. Do you want to introduce yourself, mate?
Yeah, my name's Hitchard. I'm an AWS Cloud DevOps engineer at Levin. We're an APN partner, and I'm glad to be talking today.
Excellent. It's good to have you here. As usual, everybody, we have a LinkedIn group where you can, if you search for New Zealand AWS Technical Community, you'll be able to join us there. So I do encourage you to reach out to us on LinkedIn, ask to join us. I'll be able to approve you really, really quickly. And the good thing is you'll be able to ask us some questions. So we're both on that group. If you do have any questions after the stream, that's a great way to contact us. If you want to get copies of the slides or you want to get copies of any of the code, that's a great way to contact us as well. And as we go through today, if you have any questions, do throw them in the chat. So we'll be monitoring the chat for any questions, and we'll go from there. Excellent. Let's talk about today's topic. What are we talking about today, mate?
So we're talking about AWS Migration Hub Refactor Spaces. It's a new tool that's been out in general availability since I think start of the year, maybe Feb or March. And we're going to go through a practical guide and showcase the capabilities this tool brings to any company looking at making their migrations easier.
Yeah, it's been a really, really popular tool. It's, as you say, we've only gone to general availability in the last few months, and people have been scrambling, customers have been scrambling to use it. It makes life really, really easy. So I'm glad that we're going to do a dive deep session on it today, and get your experience on it as well. Would be looking forward to it. Let me add your slides to the screen, and then maybe you can jump in there and start walking us through it.
Awesome. So just a little bit of an introduction again. My name is Hitchard. I'm an AWS Cloud DevOps engineer at Levin. And I've been working there since October 2021. Previously worked as a software dev, and I've delivered a bunch of projects for retail, health tech, nonprofits, government organizations. Well, delivering, kind of still in the game. I've used AWS so far on the production side to deliver web apps, mobile apps, landing zones, and provision a lot of networking and infrastructure resources. And I'm certified as an AWS Developer Associate and an SA Associate. I work at Levin. We're part of the Spark Business Group, along with Curious, Spark, Digital Island, and CCL. We're basically the cloud transformation BU of Spark, and we deal with a lot of the cloud transformation stuff that anyone would need help with. So
you're teaching me today, but I had no idea that you guys were involved with Spark, which is obviously not only one of our big customers, but also one of our big partners.
Yep, and that's most of it for shoutouts. Let's go straight into content. So what's AWS Migration Hub? It's kind of a single destination for migration and modernization. I think of it as platform as a service. Who needs it? I would say anyone who is carrying out a migration to AWS or on AWS. So if you've got an existing workload on AWS that you're trying to modernize or update, or if you've got an on-prem server that you want to move to the cloud and you're thinking of moving to AWS, do look at Migration Hub. There's a bunch of services that are included in Migration Hub. So there's stuff around discovery, planning, and strategy, which is all data-driven. Migration Hub Refactor Spaces, which is what we'll be focusing on, and an orchestrator that basically helps you manage workflows during migration. So there's a lot to the service. We're going to touch on one prong in the service, which is basically the refactor spaces. And that focuses on incremental app refactoring. It's quite a powerful tool. And along with the other tools that you have, I'm sure that migrations will become a lot more easier. So if you feel this tool's helpful, do look at the other tools that are available in Migrations Hub.
Quick question.
Mhm.
So when we talk about migration, what are we talking about? Are we talking about migrating virtual machines, or are we talking about migrating containers, or are we talking about migrating physical hardware to the cloud? Where's this problem? What's this problem solving for us?
So specifically around refactor spaces, we're looking at mostly moving VMs, and you could have containers, you could have a bunch of different solutions. But Migration Hub itself allows you, or kind of helps you with all of these different parts that you've mentioned. So if you have an on-prem connection, there's some there's some discovery tools available. So you can use them to connect to your on-prem stuff and see how things are going as well. Correct me if I'm wrong there again.
Yeah, no, the discovery tool's brilliant, right? So it'll allow you to have a search around the network, see what's actually out there, and it will build a profile for you to say, hey, this is where you're at in your migration journey. So you can keep track of what's been migrated and what's not yet been migrated. So yeah, pretty powerful stuff.
Yep. And again, you can see a screenshot of the Migration Hub page over here. We're going to be at the right at the bottom over there where it says refactor spaces. That's what we're focusing on. You can see the whole list of other tools available. One of them you mentioned was discovery stuff, which is on top right there. And yeah, that's the homepage. So sometimes it can get a little bit daunting if you look at all of the services. Just focus on one right now. That's us for today. And well, before we go into migrating a monolithic application, we're going to discuss the approach we're going to take. It's called the Strangler approach, and it's an approach that was introduced by Martin Fowler. He got this inspiration when he was on his trip to Australia and he saw the Strangler fig trees. So it's been out there for quite a while. Basically, if you look at the tree, the Strangler fig plants, they seed in the tree branches and they kind of make their way down over time around the tree, and over time they completely root in the soil, strangling and killing the tree. You can see a picture over there. That's kind of how it looks when the roots have started surrounding the tree. So we basically use a similar approach in our migration, or in a way to rewrite the system that we want to update or migrate. And there's also, well, I personally haven't done any migrations around this yet, but I have been looking at this space for quite a while. Earlier this year at the AWS Summit, if you have watched the keynote, we had we had Vicky Miller from Kmart who came in and spoke about Kmart Australia's migration. So if you read that a small piece right there, it says they used the Strangler approach to move component parts piece by piece, and they're basically running two platforms simultaneously. So the old monolith and the new piece by piece parts of components of your platform. They're both running simultaneously. So
As
that's kind of how.
interesting. As
Mhm.
part of that keynote, Vicky was when she talked about this the Strangler approach. One of the things that she mentioned is trying to get a monolithic application, this massive application, and move it all in one go. They tried those approaches previously and just couldn't get anywhere, right? And it always seems like such a big task to move these big applications. But the Strangler approach allowed you to go, okay, let's just break this down into its subcomponents and slowly move it over one piece at a time. And that's how they
Yeah.
were able to gain traction. I think part of that is like small wins, right? It's like you do part of it and it works, and you set it up like as an API into the cloud that you can then call, and you're like, oh, great, this works, and it builds a bit of confidence in the team as well, right?
That's correct. It's kind of like if you look at migrations as a big bang approach, that's kind of what you're gonna get. You have to go through it very slowly. It's like moving a dial one step at a time, and that's kind of the approach that the Strangler fig brings to us, inspired by nature in a way. Some of the benefits in this approach is you can almost leave the application alone. In some cases, you do need to make smaller changes to your monolithic application so that it works with the newer microservices that you introduce or newer services that you introduce. Like you mentioned, you're taking a small part of the monolith, and you can either build and test new features around it, or take a small piece off from it one step at a time. So building and testing new features becomes quite easy. And because of that, you've also got faster release cycles and rollbacks. So you can test something, release it, something's going wrong, pull it back as soon as you need to pull it back without too much risk. So
so it's a bit of a tip for that. Well, one of the features we have is we can serve if you're using like Route 53 for your DNS, we have the ability to serve a certain percentage of traffic in one direction, right? So you could say, right, we've built this new component, API process possibly in the cloud, and we've still got our original monolith application. We can send some of the requests that are going to the monolith application to the cloud application and just test it like as a percentage and slowly ramp that up, or to your point, roll it back if we see that there's a problem. It's a function that I've seen used really, really powerfully when taking this migration approach, and to be honest, not enough customers use it. It's to me that A/B testing is simple to set up, easy to roll back, and allows you to do testing in live environments, right?
Absolutely, the feature is quite a powerful feature. I've seen very few companies using A/B testing in production. It's kind of like sometimes when you visit a website and it looks a bit off, you refresh it and you get a different UI. So it's one of those times where they're very subtly testing a few features, maybe UI changes, maybe some other changes. So the weighted routing that you mentioned is actually, yes, quite helpful, and could be something you could look at when you're using when you're migrating stuff. So again, faster release cycles and rollbacks right there, and build and test the new features use Route 53 along with it. But because you're building new features separately and you're keeping them independent to a lot of the monolith, because that's how microservices work, you kind of get code agnostic environments and code agnostic teams. So one team could be working in Node.js, while the other team could work on some other language that they prefer, and they could have slightly different schemas. It's not all built in, so there's no coupling within teams, but there's high cohesion in terms of how different parts of the of your application or your microservices work. And that also means that there's reduced risk during cutover. So when you're moving, on the production, everyone's probably going to be scrambling to make sure all parts of this monolith now work once you've migrated it. But since you started, if you use the Strangler pattern, you've already got a lot of these components out there tested, and most of them almost ready, not too dependent on the monolith. So that means reduced risk as well. And lastly, you can see a lot of the benefits immediately, which is, I think, one of the most important things when you're trying to convince people this works, especially convince the business side, that this tool actually works and we've made things easier right away. So I'm going to visualize the Strangler approach so that it makes a little more sense. If you look at the diagram we've got a front end, we've got the monolith, which is the big box with the three services that we have: customers, bookings, and reportings. And we've got our database. So that's how your standard monolith would kind of look. And when you introduce the strangler pattern, you could, I say, you should start by adding a new service, so a new microservice, or taking to the part that's the most easiest to remove from the existing existing monolith. So what can be easily peeled out from this current system without affecting a lot of the other stuff. So on the next slide, in this case, we've introduced a new microservice. That's microservice and the database, right? Thinking of it on AWS terms, it could be a Lambda function connecting to a DynamoDB database. That's kind of the example we'll go with in the live demo. Could be anything else. Could be an ECS cluster, or could be an orchestrator that's doing a bunch of other, orchestrating a bunch of processes for something. So you introduce one microservice, and then you take one of the existing.
Would mention there that we also have, so one of the big criticisms or one of the big pushbacks I get from customers is that the original database and now the database you have in the cloud, which in this case is DynamoDB, keeping those in sync is problematic. So obviously we have database migration service, which allows us to do exactly that, right? So you can first of all migrate the data from on-prem to cloud, but it will also keep that data in sync as well as you scale out the solution.
That's correct. So there's migration services that are offered from the database migration service, as you mentioned. Another way to visualize it on this screen here would be you'd introduce maybe a stream that would go and just update anything on the monolithic database. So anytime you have a write on your microservice database, there'd be a stream that would go and update any any dependent data on the monolithic database, and that can all of the other services until you come to a point where you don't really need the monolithic database or monolithic services. So like I mentioned earlier, you take the easiest part of your monolith application, slice it out, and here we've got the customer's microservice. So you can see I've just graded out. It's available in the so in this case, it's available in the monolithic application, but it's not really being used. We've got the microservice instead. So the front end goes straight to the microservice, which connects to your monolith to get any dependent data. And that continues on for the other services. As you can see now, we've got all of our services as a microservice. We've got the existing monolith. Let's say there's some dependencies in your monolith that are still needed until cutover or until you update a few of the other services around it. You can still have it there. Doesn't really have to go away. It just starts shrinking in size in a sense, or in terms of dependability, you're less and less dependent on your monolith for tasks over time. And lastly, what happens is the monolith and the monolithic database are gone. You've just got your front end and you've got a bunch of microservices.
Yeah, I really like this pattern. It's at the end of the day, you want to go towards microservices anyway, right? So this is achievable bites to get rid of your monolithic applications. So yeah, big fan of the pattern.
Yep, same here. I was actually watching one of the videos I think we had on the Netflix microservices pattern with AWS. So how Netflix was using a really large amount of microservices to power everything. That's quite interesting as well. You should give that a look sometime.
Cool.
So back to refactor spaces. So refactor spaces basically uses this strangler fig pattern, and it builds some infrastructure for you under the hood. Basically, networking application proxy stuff. So that's an API gateway, service endpoints, traffic routing, and all of that. It builds all of this for you, so that you don't have to figure out how you'd implement the strangle fig pattern. You can just start implementing it. So some of the services, like I mentioned earlier, are API gateway, network load balancer. We've got a few IAM roles deployed under the hood, and the good thing is this works across accounts. So some of the recommendations in production generally that are given to customers is one workload on one account, and that kind of helps over here as well, because you've got your one account for the existing application, which would be a monolith. You'd keep one account for your microservice and so on, for the other services, and then your main account would be the refactor environment, which would just be sharing a lot of the networking resources across the other accounts. So it has the power to go cross account, and has the power to stay in a single account for test. But once someone decides to take this to production, it's good to adhere to the recommendations and have separate accounts working, so that it just makes things easier when things don't work, or if you want to add stuff. So there's a few concepts that you need to know for refactor spaces. One is the environment, like I mentioned, which is basically your go-to place. It's the central. It's the account that creates the refactor spaces. Environment is basically the master account that has, the master account for the margin that has networking, applications, and services across the other accounts. So it kind of keeps track of all the other applications and services that you have, and it makes sure that there's networking resources that connect all these different parts to each other. Then you've got applications, which are basically endpoints to expose your app. Applications contain services and routes. Services are basically your endpoints, they can be HTTP or HTTPS endpoints. So what you can do is have EC2, ECS instances, Elastic Beanstalk instances, something running in maybe one of your private VPCs. So you can use a lot of those endpoints, and you can use Lambda functions. We're looking at both of these. So in our live demo, the monolith will basically be an EC2 instance, and we'll have a Lambda function that we'll add. And lastly, we've got the routes, which are just proxies that forward requests to a specific service. So that's most of the stuff you need to know about refactor spaces. You've got your environment, which contains applications, and applications have services and routes. Services are your endpoints. Routes are what route goes to what endpoint. That's about it. So looking at a few screenshots here to explain some of these concepts, so that there's a visual side to these concepts. You've got your home page, and you'd create an environment here, which is basically one of the test environments I've created at this point. Just a good thing to know, I was curious about the quotas yesterday, so had a look around. You can have up to 50 environments, 600 applications, 500 services, and 1,000 routes. I might need to double check that 600 applications. I'm not sure if I type an extra 0 or if that's actually 600. So the quotas were quite impressive. I decided to put them in on here with the link. So there's quite a lot of space for you to work here. And I'd say the environment takes about 5 or 10 minutes to build. Once you just give it the environment name and some other parameters we can look at in a bit. Inside your environment, you'd have your applications. You can view the services and routes. You can view networking. You can view which other accounts have access to your to this application. So the sharing side, and tags and policies, which are pretty straightforward. Um, yeah, it's pretty simple here. So in this example, I've added one example for an application that you can see here that has services and two routes. And you can see it's linked to an API gateway that's basically managing a lot of the proxies on the networking side. You can click a link to that API gateway and have a look at it directly. Probably make some changes over there if needed. Once you have, so let's see what happens inside or when we want to create an application. Again, fairly simple. You give it the name and the VPC it's going to be in, and takes about 5 to 10 minutes. It builds all the infrastructure for you. So the API gateway, any networking resources, a network load balancer, and a bunch of other things. I don't know if you can find a lot of the architecture or details on what it builds, but that's some stuff I could find from the documentation.
Yeah, I know for that infrastructure. So everything it does build is still available via the dashboards, right? So you can go away and see exactly what it's built. So one of your recommendations is when you set this up initially is to set it up in a specific account. And that way, it's easier to keep track of what it's built there as well, right? But to your point, you're going to build everything you need to take a microservices approach to building this application. So the ability to scale up and scale down, whenever you might need to. So obviously the application load balancer is going to help with that. And of course the routing that you've already talked about as well, which is going to be pretty important. And API gateways, which is, that becomes the front or the gateway for your application. So yeah, should be everything you need there based on our experience of building microservices applications.
That seems correct. Yep. And API gateway by itself is also a pretty powerful tool if you've seen it walk around with quite a few Lambda endpoints or like a huge API gateway set up for everything. It's pretty amazing to see how those work. So here's an example application. So when I click on this application, you can see there's a summary of what's there. Again, there's the proxy URL that would basically go to my, if I've set something up as my default proxy, it will basically go to that. You can add a service. So you've got your services here. I've got 2 services in my example. And you've got your routes, which is, I'm not sure if you can see that very clearly, but there's that one /, which is just the default one. So this would be the default route. If I go to that proxy endpoint there, it would take me to whatever's on this default route, which is whatever service endpoint's on there. And then I've got another path up there that would take me, if I use that path, it would take me to that specific target endpoint. So I could add more and more endpoints for different services as I go along and start removing stuff from the actual, either the default, which would likely be a monolith, or the actual monolith. I could start stripping away stuff from that and exposing these endpoints to either other parts of my business, or I could expose them to clients and test them if needed. So once these are open, you can start using them immediately, basically.
Cool.
Oops, just a second. And yeah, just a quick example on how you can create services. On the left side, I've got an example for a Lambda. I just give it a name, so it's description. I choose a Lambda, and choose a specific Lambda, and I select the routing option. So what endpoint I want the service to route to, or do I want to route it to the default service? Same thing for the HTTP endpoint. I've got I need to select a VPC it's in. So if it's shared across, if this environment is shared across multiple accounts, you should be able to see multiple VPCs up here. And you can select an endpoint over there. So that could be your EC2 beanstalk, Elastic Beanstalk, or your ECS cluster. Could be any HTTP endpoint that you use. And you've got an optional head check endpoint that you can input over there. So if it's left blank, it just uses the above endpoint, the service endpoint, to check that the URL is available / instance is healthy. And we can jump to the live demo now, which is basically a LAMP stack monolith with a single microservice. I couldn't add too much, but it's a good amount of stuff for you to have a look around.
Right, praying to the demo gods then, mate, that it all goes well.
Yeah. Well, we started off right here, so I need to log in again. I'll just get my console signed in and reload a bunch of these pages that I had open for you. So I've already got my EC2 in right now, which would basically signify a lift and shift into AWS, or building something on there. So in my case, I started off with a local Apache server, and I will again lift and shift into AWS in this case. I've got one instance running. It's right here. I'm just gonna SSM into it to show you I've actually added some stuff there. And I've also got here the public IP for that. So this is just the home page. If I do so if I go here to HTML, I've got I'm not sure how much you can see over there. So I've got my index.php. I've got the PHP myadmin stuff over there. I've got some CSS and some other files that I was trying to work around with. In this case, we'll just look at the index, which is available here. So that's my public IP. It could be a private IP. If you're on company VPN and working on a private instance, in this case, it's just a web server. I've kept port 80 open, so it's safe for me to expose this IP address. Got some PHP info over here. Can't do a PHP app without the PHP info. And I was trying to play around with the cart to see if I can get some stuff done there, but that's still, in my case, in my monolithic case, it's a work in progress. But the business said we want to start moving to microservices. So, yeah, these two images are loaded from from a MySQL server. So image and the image data is loaded from server here. I've got my PHP myadmin dashboard monolith server. I've got a bunch of databases that are mostly empty except for the products one, which has the two products that I'm pulling over there. And that's all just one big box which has Apache, my fen, and also has my database in it. Kind of represents a monolithic web server. And I'm just gonna close this one. And let's say now I've already got this existing environment I showed you. If I create a new environment, just keeping that on time, let's say live demo. I've got my environment description over here. And I could update the IAM service link permissions that are being used if needed. I'll just leave it to the default one. that's gonna basically have all the permissions that Refactors needs to build all the networking side of things. So there's some stuff around load balancing, API gateway, again, load balancing, and at the start there was some stuff around the EC2 network interfaces and resource sharing and stuff. So here's it's basically a default policy. I'm gonna leave it the way it is. And whoops, I added an equal to sign there. Next, it optionally asks me to create an application, which I'm gonna create an application that says live monolith. And that's the VPC, which is in my current account. It's just a standard VPC with two public and two private subnets. And you can see I've got a regional endpoint here. I could change the proxy endpoint type if needed, which is not really needed in my case. And also, if I want to share this environment with other accounts, I can add them. And in my case, I don't really need to share it with other accounts. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And final review, environments created. That will take about 5 to 10 minutes, I guess. Do not refresh this page. I was scared to accidentally refresh the page on seeing that.
I think refreshing it might submit it again. But look, that looks pretty step by step, right? So it's thought about the things that you might need to think about, like multi-account access to the environment, for example. It's pretty painless from your perspective, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty painless. It's mostly just click and set it up once you've got your basic environment on there. Again, for larger environments, you will need some planning around it on what accounts are going to be sharing the resources, because you've got a bunch of accounts running a bunch of different services or workloads that you need to keep track of. But it's still pretty painless. Oh, what is that? Oh, okay. There you go. I got an error because I'm already using that VPC in my test environment. So I'm going to move back to my test environment and basically show you this application that I showed on some of the screenshots. So I've got my main service here, which is basically my monolith. I can go through this, and I'm not going to create one, but I can just go through the form again. So I've got my service name, service 3, and I've got well, whatever description. I can select my VPC, chop the endpoint that I have. So if I go to EC2 over here, you should be able to find your public IPv4 DNS that you can use as an endpoint. I'll put that as HTTP or HTTPS. Health check not required. And this is the important part, which is route traffic to the service. If you want, you can include child paths or say it's something else. It's just I'm going to give this a shot anyway. So let's say live and create that service.
So explain to me what that service is doing for us.
That service is basically taking an HTTPS endpoint or a Lambda endpoint and adding a proxy for you over there. What that means is you've got your service, it's connected to a certain proxy route, or it's actually your default service. So in this case, you can see over here, my default service is these EC2s, which is mono service over here. and that routes to a different source path. So the slash source path is my basic my default service, which would generally mean that's my monolith, and it's just adding different routes for endpoint that you have.
Cool.
Well, you can see there's a proxy endpoint over here. Since I've already got my main service, if I go to that endpoint, it's going to load this. Well, I'm going to change that to index.php because I realized after a long time that it's not loading the CSS and the other stuff. So that goes to my home page. Pretty much the same thing as the actual endpoint. Is just routed on a different, pretty much the same as the actual IP of the instance. So it's just routed through a different endpoint on API gateway. What we'll do is I can just jump into API gateway and show you that as well. And the benefit is that you can start exposing, oops, we're not supposed to see that yet. You can start exposing this API endpoint to a lot of your different services, or have weighted routing on that, and just have like 10 or 20% of your users go to it. So back to your API gateway, you can see I've got my API gateway that was created by this API gateway was created by migration of refactor spaces. For any route that I add, it adds all the stuff automatically here. So I've got my stuff for my product route, which I created, and a proxy for my default route as well. So that one, if I go here, it goes to my EC2 instance, which you can see, and that one there goes to Lambda, which is my second service that I've created.
Nice.
So, oops, back to Migration Hub. Yep, and well, my Lambda over here, it's connected to this Lambda that you could, let's assume one of the dev team created to replace my product manager, well, product data store or product handler. It basically connects to my database and manages or handles all the requests that come in, and well, create, read, update, delete. Right now I have only created read and create endpoints that work so far. So it's a bit incomplete, but you can read stuff and you can create inputs through that. So it's just a basic Lambda. I can make the code available if you reach out. And basically, if I take this over here, well, no, actually, that's my EC2 instance. That is my actual store. Instead of prod, I'm going to change that to product. And I've got my query string parameters for a certain product that I want. If I go there, it's going to give me all of my data, which can now be consumed by it's got some data here, which is basically on my DynamoDB table. And now I can have different parts of my either my existing app or my new app start consuming that data. So ideally what I would do would be to go to my LAMP server and start changing the SQL client if I don't want to read all of images that I showed you through. Instead of reading them through SQL, I would start reading them to this endpoint because I've got all my info right here.
Yeah, nice and easy, consumable,
yep.
Right?
Yep.
You've got all set up now. Yeah, look, mate, that looks really impressive, and really seems to be really easy to get started, at least, right? I'm sure as we go through these big monolithic applications, we're always going to run into problems. But to me, it looks like we've got all of the components we need to be successful in breaking that monolith application down. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, and that's basically an introduction to a lot of the migration hub refactor spaces. I think that's us for today. Feel free to reach out to me or Trevor on the AWS New Zealand technical community, and I can give you code snippets or presentation slides if needed. Or reach out to either of us on LinkedIn.
We've got the group there name in chat, so if you just click on that, request access, and we can get you approved on that. We want it to be as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions for us, or for any of the AWS technical community as well, throw it into that group, and we can get you some answers. Listen, mate, it's been really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. This has been really useful. I think the whole concept of Migration Hub is really important to help, to stop that burden, right? The one thing I get from customers is, what's stopping you from getting to the cloud? And it is always, we have this monolithic application. It's too difficult. I don't want to be spending cycles on it. And my point to them is, well, if you don't spend cycles on it today, when are you going to spend cycles on it? Let's try and break this down into smaller chunks. And that's exactly what the Migration Hub allows us to do, is break this down into smaller problems. So I'd like, so I'm a big fan of it. Interestingly, you probably haven't seen the announcement today, mate, because we only announced it a couple of hours ago. But one of the features we have is we now have extended IAM roles outside of AWS. So this also, I see this as a use case for helping to migrate to the cloud, because if you start using these IAM roles with your current applications, on-prem applications as an example, it makes it easier when you migrate to the cloud, because it's just using the same IAM roles as you move across as well. So I'm optimistic that that's going to help with customers migrating to the cloud.
Yeah, I did hear about it earlier through one of my colleagues, and I think everyone in the AWS space is quite hyped to hear about that feature. It means a lot of different possibilities are out there now, and yes, that can be applied to migrations as well. Again, thanks for having me. It's been really my pleasure talking on this on the stream, because migrations, as you mentioned, is a pain for a lot of clients. If there's a tool that makes things easier, I'd love to put it out there. Yep.
Yeah, good stuff. By the way, are you joining us for the New Zealand Cloud Days? So we've got a .NET Developer Day coming up in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch at the end of the month. Are you coming along to that, mate? Or
I don't think so. I might have a look at it and see what the dates are. Maybe I can make it.
Yeah, so I've thrown the link in the chat there, right at the bottom. Basically, it's a limited space, so if people are interested, I'd say get in there and register early. We're opening it up to the wider community I believe on the 7th, which is actually that's today. So get in quick if you want to get ahead of the crowd to secure your space. We will have. It's going to be in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. There's an opportunity to join us in all three locations. It will be a physical event, so I know we haven't done many of those recently. So it's a great opportunity to meet the AWS technical team, and the content's on there. But essentially, it's about programming on .NET for AWS, and it also talks about migration into AWS as well. So one of the areas I'm interested in is the machine learning AI. Obviously, I'll be doing a presentation around that. But another area is porting .NET applications across to AWS. So I'm really looking forward to that. We have what we call porting assistance, and that's another great tool to help you migrate across to the cloud. Excellent. Well, thanks very much, mate, for joining us today. Chat, if you're interested in reaching out to us, do join our LinkedIn group, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks for having me. See ya.